Should you watch A Faraway Paladin? Short answer, yes. Absolutely. Specifically, the first 6 episodes are absolutely brilliant. But the show is a great example about having a lot of foundational direction, meaning, and focus in a very tight story, and then I feel like loses itself a little bit in the middle. Luckily, finding itself in the end, but I would love to talk to you more about it. But ultimately, what is this show? Well, this is a light isekai, meaning it's kind of relevant, but not quite. An isekai in the sense that the character is reborn and has some past trauma that makes him forged to be a hero, or at least to be better than his previous life, but ultimately doesn't drag too much on it. Doesn't really refer to the old world too much, just kind of a baseline of, this is why I'm pushing so hard to become better, and all of these things. Long story short, this boy is reborn in this new world, and when he opens his eyes, he is greeted with a bunch of undead. An undead giant skeleton with beautiful red hair, with a giant claymore weapon, a beautiful priestess with gorgeous blonde hair, and lastly, a ghost wizard looking like Merlin. These 3 become his family. It's a beautiful story. To spoil some things for you, it's gorgeous and it's wonderful, and it is a show that has a very slow pace but still keeps you hooked all the while. The premise is these undead turn into his parents, his surrogate parents largely, teaching him how to fight, teaching him how to heal, pray, and become the man that he becomes in a couple episodes that I'm sure you'll grow to love. And of course, you might have suspected it, but these 3 are not just some warrior, priest, and of course a mage, but heroes that long since passed, and I won't spoil too much for you there, but needless to say, being trained by some of these heroes leaves this character quite strong for the world, but not quite in the overpowered, snap my fingers and obliterate a whole world kind of overpowered. It's more of a grounded edge, I guess I'll say it like that. There's an edge in combat that he has, a fluidness in his ability to actually dabble in a little bit of everything, healing, to prayer, to combat, to brute strength, to magic. But he doesn't depend on too many of them all together. He's kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none. And largely this story's tale is all about small, beautiful questions and moments within people. A love between a mother and a father. The wonder of your grandpa talking to you and communicating you lessons of grandeur. Friendship and not giving up on people. The power of what it means to have faith in something bigger than yourself, maybe. As well as a somber note of death. The show revolves seemingly around a question of death. For instance, his parents are undead. The god that this paladin ends up worshipping is in some ways like the Grim Reaper, the person that is the arbiter of death, the person that comes and guides you along your path. And of course, one thing that permeates the show is people dying all around the main character and him basically praying them into his goddess's great embrace. Not in a somber way though, and not just too much death in the negative, horrible context, and more of the release of spirits into this beautiful end, into this afterlife, if you will. And there are moments sprinkled in between where you develop a friendship and you can see this character being on the right track and pushing through his adversity and experiencing the world, because he had such a sheltered life by being basically nurtured by these outcast heroes, which were beautiful, wonderful parents, but left him isolated and a little clueless. And one beautiful thread that never gets old to me is a benevolent, kind being basically pulling this person throughout his course or story. It makes you feel like the story is basically hell-bent on some sort of wonderful conclusion or wonderful end, whilst also being the classic hero story. The story in which a person is going to go through adversity, but because there's this goddess, this great embrace, this great nudge in the right direction, this cradling of her hero, makes it all feel like it's going to end up in a wonderful way, and it does. Although I will criticize the show with one tiny nitpick, and I did want to ask you guys this. For those who do not enjoy a story that has aimlessness, I will say after the 5th or 6th episode, it does feel like that. He's kind of set off into the world without an objective, and I wish this is the point in which they would have sliced down the progression, because ultimately you just see him kind of MacGyvering around a forest, meeting some people, finding the good in those people, and then they become a permanent character on the story, which is nice, but ultimately felt a little aimless. Kind of like he was just making it up as it went along, and yeah. But then, towards the end, he straight up becomes kind of, spoiler, not too much of a spoiler, but he becomes an important person and kind of helps develop maybe possibly a town. And they're like, yeah, that's the part we'll just kind of breeze by real quick. And I'm like, what? What? Him meandering around a forest and traveling with some people. I would have rather had that be tight as hell. And then the cool part of developing a nation and like basically being a general or a baron or something, that'd be where I want to sit with a little bit and really see how he engages with those things. But ultimately, anime didn't do that. Maybe the manga, much better, no idea. Let me know if it is. But I can't help but love this show even still, even with its baggage of having a little bit of a lull in the beginning, or middle, sorry. The beginning is so beautifully strong. The come up of a origin story that is so interesting and beautiful as a family and being raised by the undead and then being super lovable, kind, and human as anybody. And then the kid basically being a reflection of their kindness, grace, and compassion, and just is just beautiful. And then ultimately for you to get to the end of the story, and for him to kind of become an amazing person. Again, I wish they would have developed the fact that he did become kind of incredible at the end. He had, like, all that he had achieved was basically impossible, and they kind of whitewashed that a little bit by just being like, and he's great, without really letting it sink in and seeing how people react to his achievements. This is something I think Overlord and Shield Hero and all these things do really well, or Reincarnated Slime, I meant to say. It does really well, is like, you need someone to gauge someone else's proclivity. And of course the elf is kind of like that in the show, which is his friend and companion and such. But largely the story is him just embarking on the world and becoming this grand paladin, and also spreading the word of his goddess, bringing them back from the brink. As well, if I put more cherry on top, there does seem to be a story thread where it seems like he is going to come back in 10 years to the same seal that his parents locked away, don't want to spoil too much, and kick the immortal king's ass, essentially. Won't go too much into it, but largely, ladies and gentlemen, I do think the show is absolutely worth watching. For the first time ever, I think I may suggest you watch the first 6 episodes, and maybe watch the first episode in which he makes the friend with the elf guy, and then just skip some shit until he gets to the town. Because it's kind of like a little bleh, at least to me. But alas, ladies and gentlemen, it's still a wonderful show. Again, the beginning is magical and so good. Also, it looks gorgeous. It's like a beautiful show in general. But alas, ladies and gentlemen, I would highly suggest watching it. Thank you kindly for your time. I will continue to talk your ear off about anime for as long as you'll have me. Thank you kindly for your time, and goodbye.